Okay, whenever you're ready, Acting Chair.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. My phone. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rod Dembowski, your Vice Chair, Acting Chair for just a few minutes, hopefully here. We'll call to order our January meeting of the North Shore Park and Recreation Service Area Board. And Barbara, do we need to call the roll?
Yeah, let's do a roll call.
All right.
All right, so Acting Chair Dembowski.
Here.
Board Member Zorns. Not here. Board Member Menke. Also not here. Board Member Mead is not here. Board Member Perry.
Here.
Board Member Arndt.
Here.
And Board Member Shrubnik.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum of 4.
All right, we're just starting off with just enough. I think as board members know, Council Member McNeil served as our chair. He's no longer on the Bothell City Council as of the end of the year, and I became the acting chair as the vice chair. I think our first item here tonight is the election of a chair. And let me just jump in and open the floor for nominations. And I'll take the first opportunity to nominate Council Member Deborah Shrubnik from Kenmore. I've talked to Deborah. She said she was willing to serve as our chair. Historically, the chair's role has been filled by a city council member from one of our city members. And so I think it would be appropriate to continue that tradition. Deborah's been very active on the NPRSA. Has obviously, I think you've all seen her emails. She reads the materials, follows up, and has a particular interest in doing our work that we need to do for any potential levy renewal, as well as looking at the other capacities here of the organization with respect to its recreational opportunities. I think she's also interested in making sure we don't leave out the Kenmore Senior Center in future investments. And I just think she would be a wonderful chair. And I somehow convinced her to at least be willing to accept the nomination. So I offer that as a path forward.
Do we need seconds for nominations here?
We'll take it, council member, to be safe.
Well, then I'll second that.
Awesome. All right. Barbara, will you note that for the minutes? Councilmember Arndt seconded the nomination. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? I don't know why we do that, but it feels like we do that 3 times. Councilmember Perry's giving me the nod, like, yeah, that's what you do. Seeing no others, I'm going to close nominations. I'm going to call for a voice vote. All in favor of having Councilmember Deborah Shrubnik serve as the chair of the North Shore Park and Recreation Service Area Board, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Barbara, you can note that that was unanimously carried. I am so relieved. I thank you so much, Deborah. I did promise her, I said, if you need me, I'll serve as your vice chair unless someone else wants to. I'm happy to stand aside.
Yeah, I assume, do we go with that as the next piece of the agenda? The vice chair?
You all may know I got, quote unquote, stuck with the vice chair by missing a meeting.
Well, I would like to formally nominate you as vice chair if that's the next piece of our agenda.
All right. I'd be willing to serve so long as nobody else wants to serve. That was my condition. So, and please don't be shy if someone else would like the role.
All right.
Please don't be shy.
Any other nominations? We'll go once. Any other nominations going twice? Any other nominations? Third call. All right. And seeing no other nominations, we'll close nominations. And I think, again, we can take a voice vote. So all in favor of Councilmember Dembowski as vice chair, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right, the ayes have it. And Barbara, I think you'll record that. All right. So let's see, do we have any public for public comment?
We don't have anyone online, and we did not receive any written public comment prior to the meeting. So don't think so.
All right. So I think we can proceed, and just let me know, since this is a new role for me, if I am messing up. Please just let me know. So the next thing I'm seeing on the agenda is the consent agenda that includes minutes and vouchers. I will entertain a motion. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Oh, you have it on the screen. That's a little different than we do.
So moved.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you. All right, so we are on the first action item. Not seeing here who is presenting, but it is staff, I believe, but I don't know who. So I will let folks just proceed.
Yep, that would be me.
Okay, thank you.
Christine here. Yep. So our first action item is we need to make some revisions to our bylaws. As you know, we've kind of, since our bylaws were put into place, we've kind of moved forward with doing business differently. We have when we have bi-monthly meetings instead of monthly meetings. And so for staff to be more effective and be more nimble and moving forward with our business, we would like to just make a few substantive changes to the bylaws. One would expand signature authority for the executive director. That will help us move forward with signing or executing documents, agreements, especially since we have the bi-monthly meetings. This does not eliminate the board's authority to approve or decline any agreements or documents. The executive director will only be able to execute documents that have been previously approved by the board. We also needed to make some changes to clear up processes for electing an acting chair to serve on board meetings, especially when, say, we have a meeting where the chair or the vice chair is not present. So we added some language so that we can move forward with the meeting there. And then we also added more detailed roles for staff and or additional board officers. And those were included in your packet. So does anyone have any questions or concerns about the changes that we made?
And before we get to that, we did have a couple people enter, and I just want to make sure that they are marked as in attendance for the record. Who was new? I cannot. It just says 11
We have
additional
Jared Hill
participants.
and Marita Colburn, I believe. Jared
Great,
is
thank you.
staff at Woodinville and Marita is staff at Kenmore.
And
Perfect, thank you.
and Robbie has been waiting in the waiting room for a while.
Okay, let me check and see if I can get him in.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so now
I
let's
think
entertain some
Councilmember
questions.
Zorn may have joined. If I'm looking at this, I'm not sure we got her earlier.
Say that again.
I think Councilmember Zorn's from Bothell may have joined as well.
Yes, she's on as
Oh,
well.
okay.
Thank you. Questions about this topic and the three kind of substantive changes to the bylaws?
Dembowski.
Yeah, Councilmember Dabowski.
Thank
Yep.
you, Chair Trudnick. I just wanted to thank the staff for taking a look at this item, and I think my sense is it will help us move forward more effectively. In my little short time as chair, I think we've had to sign documents, which is a little unusual, and I think this just advances the professionalism of the organization. So I think that my sense is they're good changes, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into them, and I'm happy to support them.
Councilmember Perry.
Yeah, Councilmember Perry. Are people using the raise hands? If they are, I'm not
Oh,
seeing
can
it,
do
so-
that too. Did not, but
Yeah.
I can. Yes, good.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I would agree. I think it's great. I'm a big systems and structure person, so the less conversation we can have and take the time of the precious time of the committee and staff to deal with this back and forth, the better. And so it does, I feel like it does professionalize it, and would just love to see this kind of thing across the board as we think of it, to allow folks to do their job and not have us bottleneck.
Questions? Other comments?
I move that we adopt the proposed changes.
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll second the motion. Let's see. And the exact is to amend the bylaws as presented. Let's see. I think that's it. So, and we have a second. Any discussion? All right. Let us take a vote. All those in favor of the bylaws of the NPRSA board as presented, signify by saying aye.
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 All those against say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you. Let's see. Topic number 2, consideration of authorization of professional services agreement A2401 with ARC Architects for a needs assessment and feasibility study for a youth community center. Let's go into the presentation.
All right. So in November's, our last meeting in November, the board directed staff to proceed with awarding ARC Architects the needs assessment and feasibility study for the youth community center, and to begin preparing a contract, set up a grant fund, allocate $50,000 for staffing support, and ensure the NPRSA remains sole authority on any projects pertaining to the youth community center. All of the items, we are in the middle of contract negotiations. As far as just standard clauses, we already have a scope of work, and we also have the fee schedule, which both were in your packets. And so it's just really indemnification clauses and things like that our legals are going back and forth with. And we have a grant fund set up to separate the grant monies from our general funds. And we have the allocation of the $50,000 for staffing report. We did also verify with legal that as long as the terms of the contract for the grant monies from King County were allowed for that we would be good to go. So we're in the middle of verifying that with King County staff. So like I said, the scope of work and the fee schedule were given in your packets. And so the next slide, please. Oh, is that? Oh, here we go. Sorry. Here is a summary of the fee schedule. So in phase 1, the scope is immersion, market and needs assessment, community outreach, site identification, site culling, and site analysis. The total for that is $160,000. And just so I guess I should say, we have written in the contract that we have the allowance in our contract to stop our study at this point at phase 1 after the board receives the report, phase 1 report from ARC. We do have the ability to stop at that point and maybe save money if this is not going where we where we want it to go, right? And so we have phase 2 scope, which is deeper into concept refinement, cost and fundings, and then of course the financial report. So altogether, total, we have $256,000. This is including reimbursables. So that is the total contract amount. With that said, we did want to kind of present other additional considerations. So ARC and staff recommends that we talk about putting together a steering committee, which would include board members and any other partners as the North School District or even the Senior Center. And staff also recommends that we move forward with this proposed scope of work as a tool that will inform future levy planning, hopefully, potential future levy planning. So does anyone have any questions? I think this is something, I think our intent is for the board to approve the fee schedule and the scope of work in hopes that staff could get a contract together and execute that, and also put together start putting together a steering committee to move this work forward.
Folks, what questions do you have?
I've raised my hand. I don't know if you can see it.
Councilmember Perry.
Thank you. So I'm just checking on the feasibility, the cost of the feasibility study. Is this within the scope of a standard cost for a feasibility study, this $160,000? I don't know why that seems high to me, but checking because I'm sure you've done some comparison.
Yes, I believe that it's within a reasonable amount from other studies that I've seen.
Councilmember Zorns?
Yeah, just a quick question. What on the steering committee, as this moves forward, I want to make sure that James McNeil has a place in this conversation. And Rod may have a better idea of where that ought to be, but if there's a place for him at the table, I want to make sure that he's there.
Councilmember Dembowski or staff, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, we could definitely, as we form the steering committee, we can definitely reach out to, if that is the wish of the board, we can definitely reach out to James McNeil and offer him a place on the steering committee.
And this Rod, from my perspective, that seems like a good idea if James is willing to serve. I know this was a priority of his, and obviously he was a leader on it, and I think there's merit to the idea. And this board had set up kind of a subcommittee to work on this, and we might look at who was on that. I know I was on it, but we might kind of reconstitute that. And if it's okay to have a hybrid group of, NPRSA board members and community members, that'd be great. There was this, I had suggested to James, and he convened it, kind of a community advisory group, and they've done some work, but maybe we could check in with them if they're still interested in working on it and try and assemble this recommended advisory group. I think it's a good idea, and I'm happy to be involved with it. As to the price, I'm actually surprised. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Seems like things are so expensive now, but to be within budget and even have a cushion from what we had kind of secured, I really want to thank our Bothell staff for negotiating what seems to be like a realistic amount to do what's quite a bit of work, like, and do a good job at it. So I'm it's a lot of money, but it seems like it will deliver a robust product back. So thank you so much. And I appreciate the staging as well. Because this is kind of a new thing for us, that if we get our first phase back and board members are like, hey, there's some things in here we may want to take a pause. That's really good idea. And thanks for building that optionality into the proposal for us. So I'm comfortable with this from what I'm seeing, and I appreciate the staff's work on it.
Councilmember Perry?
Thank you. Yeah, and it may be fine. I was thinking south of 100,000 is seems standard. I just was wondering as it goes higher, what that would look like, and the comparison. So I appreciate the vote of confidence on that, Rod. Councilmember Domowski. And I'm wondering, because I have not, so I know that these, just to be more specific, I know that these start at 50,000. They go up. We don't, they do interviews and that kind of stuff. But it really, it does tend to cap at around 100. So I'm just to be clear, that's why I raised the question of 160 or more. They tend to not go beyond that for these kinds of projects. So was curious about the additional cost of starting at 50 and kind of capping out at around 100, and then it in this it's 160. So it's a question for me. But I also wonder, because I don't know, is there it would be great to have James McNeil involved in it, since it was his vision. Is there a scenario where he would be employed by the organization that's created?
So that's a question to staff, I assume.
Or Rod, maybe you know something.
I have not heard of that ever, as something that James was interested in, or that
Okay.
Totally volunteer basis. And James, I don't know, he may be done. I don't know. He did his service. But I know he really cares about it, and I think it's a nice thought from Councilmember Zorns to reach out and ask. But I don't think we're talking about that. That's not what I've heard.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And Nathan?
I was just going to add, I've been working with the group that James convened, and that group still has not formally obtained business license or formed as a 501c and completed that process yet. And in none of the discussions so far that I've been a part of, has there been any discussion of hiring staff from among the people that are kind of participating in that group.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I think somebody else has a hand, or is that Becky? Maybe there's a tiny little screen.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, if I could just speak a little bit more to the cost estimates. So just to clarify a little bit, doing the scope of work was a little bit challenging. And I think what may seem to be a little bit higher cost is related to, there's a little bit more of a robust community engagement effort that's a part of this scope of work. There's been some similar feasibility community center type studies that have been done in the area. This one's a little bit different because of that community engagement effort. It's a little bit more robust, and it's a little bit earlier on in the process as well. And also, just there's a little bit more of a challenging nature to it, in that since the NPRSA is a regional taxing district that's doing the work, we just really have to make sure that all of our member cities, all of our member councils are very involved in that, and that we've reached out to everyone and done that really thorough engagement. So I think that cost is a little bit higher.
I appreciate hearing that. I know that it couldn't take more than, say, 30 interviews. I know there are processes, but it's a different animal because of the community engagement's different than a typical kind of a thing here. So I know Falls City is looking at something as well. There are just a bunch of these going on, and I appreciate that there are several different cities, and I can see how that would add to the cost.
I have some questions. If I don't want to cut people off, are there other questions from folks? I don't see other hands at the moment. So my question kind of has to do with a bigger picture. So we are going to the voters in November of 2025. So that's not that far away. less than 2 years. And working backwards, there would need to be some sort of campaign. Backwards from that, there would need to be an articulation of what we're looking at having funded. Working backward from that, we would need to have some sort of needs assessment that is broader than this proposed. And so my question is, how do you see this fitting in that broader piece? Could we piggyback a broader community needs assessment so that we don't inadvertently confuse our residents with multiple surveys that are maybe quite similar?
Christine, do you want to take that, or would you like for me to give a little bit of that background?
I think Becky, I would feel comfortable if you did.
This is something we have been discussing so much internally. So about midway through the year last year, we had a lot of discussions with the current board and the current board chair at the time to determine what exactly is the purpose and objective of this feasibility needs assessment, youth community center. And we had some discussions as a board, pretty light discussions, but does this information, how should it inform our levy planning? What does the NPRSA want to do for their next levy or for future levies? And at the time, the direction that the board gave us was that this really wasn't seen as an NPRSA project. It was a separate project with a separate entity. And then we seem to have shifted gears slightly to separate ourselves a little bit from the Youth Center for Excellence. But we are really happy to get additional and new guidance from this current board. We think, unfortunately, it is going to take a while to finish this feasibility study and needs assessment. There was a lot of conversation about, can this scope be broadened to more of a community center engagement effort in question, or does it really need to focus on the youth community center, which we believe it does, because the King County grant money is specifically contracted to us under the youth recreation and community center. Ideally, we could finish up this study and it would potentially inform our levy decisions or future decisions, but we don't quite know if we'll have the time to do that. But I don't know if this is helping at all, but absolutely, if the board would like to give us different direction and think more about how this actual constructed project could be an NPRSA project, then we're happy to hear that. Did that help at all?
A little bit. I mean, just a quick follow-up on that. I mean, can you say anything about kind of the schedule? You know, I was sort of mentally working backwards, but you know, can you say anything about the schedule that you see as incorporating those components in the run-up to the levy? Like when would an actual needs assessment occur that would inform more broadly our decisions about what we might want to go for the levy, for example?
Well, Christine, correct me if I'm wrong. This study, if we do it really well in a comprehensive way, it could take up to a year. I think by May of 2025, we actually have to submit levy ballot measure verbiage, if I'm correct, right, Christine?
Correct.
To our both county election offices. So that's a pretty tight window. I think that's the best general window we have right now. Could we try to speed up the study a little bit? I don't know. That's a question for Christine and our consultant. And I personally, and I think I am open to expertise from the senior center staff or whoever worked on the levy in the past. I'm not quite sure exactly how long we need to form the committees, draft the ballot measure language, do the campaigning in the community to get ready for that November 2025 ballot.
Nathan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, if you'd like, I can speak a little bit to like what the process was when we did this last time. And I wasn't there for it, but I guess some other people on this call were, if they want to speak to it more. But the NPRSA board and the senior center actually kind of moved pretty quick on the levy last time, And even against advice of some political consultants who said there wasn't enough time, they moved really fast and they got it passed because the seniors went out, represented this levy as supporting the senior center, and got it passed. And so even though it's a pretty quick timeline last time, if it's anything more than supporting the senior centers this time around, I think it's a much more sophisticated conversation, and the senior community is going to need to be brought along as well. Just from my perspective, that's what I would add to the timeline considerations.
Councilmember Perry. Thank you, Nathan.
I think we had this conversation. I may not be understanding the question, but I think if I'm understanding the question, we had this conversation, one iteration of it last time, which unfortunately resulted in a bit of a kerfluffle. But the questioning was around, there's this youth and excellence, this sports thing. And what I was hearing from folks is that it could be that exclusively and uniquely, but it also could be for kids who aren't interested in sports but want other things as well. So this youth, am I getting that right, Barbara? Okay, so this youth and community center being more encompassing was slightly out of the vision of what James McNeil had in mind. And I'm a latecomer to this, but the question was raised at that time, could we have a survey that we sent out that was about this, and could we broaden the survey to look at all things, not all things, but a number of things. Behavioral health
Right.
includes a number of things, and that was, I think, where the rub happened, that maybe there was some thought that meant that we weren't youth focused, which was not the point. The point was that we were so very youth focused that we wanted to encompass all youth, as many youth as possible in this, with the parents and the guardians and whatever, contributing that information to what they would like to see in something like this. So it was yes and rather than an either or. Am I getting that, folks? Okay. So with that in mind, I'm not quite sure where that ended, whether it was, yes, let's do that survey and let's broaden it. I mean, you can certainly do the top part much more broad and then continue on in that bottom part and say, if it were to be this, what would you like to see in X, Y, and Z? So you could hit those high notes, broader notes with folks, and then, get to the more specific things. So you could do both and, but I don't know if that significantly takes away from what this other organization that's trying to develop itself wants to do. And if that takes it into a different path than this broader youth, and I understand it as a youth and community center. Like I heard both of those words. And so if both of those things are true, then the funding from King County has been given for the youth and community center. So how does that kind of work together? And maybe Councilmember Dembowski can clarify this. I know you've been in it a lot longer than I have. So do you have any clarification on that?
Let's see. I guess what I can say is the vision here has been centered upon serving the needs of young people in the North Shore community. Sports and athletics, I think, is a part of it, but it's also for, schoolwork support, homework support,
Social gathering and stuff?
gathering,
Yeah.
think Boys and Girls Club, think
Yeah.
why. I mean, we literally, a group of us with the North Shore superintendent at the time, went and toured the Bellevue Boys and Girls Club network and a number of their facilities. So it's kind of in that space. There is the Y kind of in East Bothell over there, but the heart of North Shore, there is kind of a gap in kind of a space and infrastructure, both physical and human, to support young people outside of school. So that was the vision here. I mean, I just think Boys and Girls Club is kind of how I think of it.
Yeah.
That's kind of,
Is that other group thinking of it that way too, Rod? Is
yeah,
James thinking of it that way too?
Yeah, I would, if I'm channeling James a little bit, I think he's probably a little more, well, I think athletics is a core for him.
Yeah.
All the other youth support things are in that space as well. I mean, And, we added a penny to our Best Starts for Kids levy to support capital improvements for youth facilities like this. This was kind of the motivating thing. It's not just limited to us, it's countywide, but that was in there. So a lot of the work, I don't think it's super defined. The group that James assembled was kind of at my suggestion. I said, hey, if you really want to do this, we got to broaden community dialogue and broaden, bring some civic leaders together to help guide this thing. And that's, I think, what he was convening. And Nathan was there. We spent a Saturday at the senior center hearing from, a number of professionals on looking at facilities they developed. We went with a different group after the competitive bid, and that's okay. But my sense is, that it's youth at its core, but it's not just athletics. Athletics is part of it, but it's all the other things when you walk into a Y or a Boys and Girls Club that you would get there. And that's my sense, if that's helpful.
And do you see money from Doors Open? Oh, sorry, Chair, you should call. I'll put my hand up. Go right ahead.
Councilmember Zarnes, and then we'll go back to Councilmember Perry. And I think Christine also had her hand raised at some point.
I just wanted to
Zarnes.
echo that I had the same impression that Councilmember Dembowski has about what James valued. And it was sports, but it was also bigger than that. I remember him talking about cooking centers and STEM support and all kinds of things. So yes, I think he has a bigger picture with that. That was my impression as well.
Councilmember Perry, you had your hand raised before.
Yeah, I thought, okay. Doors Open funding. Councilmember Dembowski, this is for art, heritage, culture, and science. Do you see any of this funding coming in this direction?
I hadn't thought about that. My focus was on working with James on the Best Starts for Kids levy, where we added the capital grants program to it with this program kind of in our minds. And we found that there was interest around the county for it. And that's up and running now. We're making our first grants. There is some, I think, dollars. You're more of an expert, frankly, on the Doors Open. But
so it's $94 million a year for 6 years or something like that. And 25% of it has to come outside of Seattle to our area. We have then the enviable position of actually applying for it so that we can show that need. This year, they aren't going to start collecting until April. So the funding is going to be 60 million instead of 94 million. It'll come before the council as an implementation plan, a recommendation for us to vote on in June or July. And then in August, they'll send out the application opportunity. And so this year, there's a one-time opportunity for capital and a one-time opportunity for operating, and it's wide open. It doesn't sound like we'd be ready for that this year, but it just occurs to me that if you were going to be doing something that had to do with art, science, culture, or heritage, this would be a great thing to look at for this particular piece. It has to be a nonprofit that applies for it. So then that brings in this other organization. It can't be a municipality. So anyway, I just want to throw that out as a conversation later.
Becky?
I just want to say I love all this conversation. It is so helpful for staff. What I'd like to gently suggest is we have the funds to do this feasibility and needs assessment. It is going to be very comprehensive. I think if we do it really, really well, and as staff is intimately involved with the scope of work, I think we have a vision for what's going to be the outcome of that. And we want to deliver to you, the board, all of this information that's going to help answer so many of your questions. And it's like right now, I feel like we're already jumping to what the outcome of this feasibility and needs assessment might tell us. And I would like to say, I think there's a little bit of caution. Maybe we should not think so much about the final outcome, but do this feasibility and this needs assessment and let it inform our next steps. And I know that's probably hard to do because everyone's really excited. I am very confident that this consultant and the work that we do, it'll take into consideration what James's vision is for this area. it will take into consideration what we're hearing in other city studies that are being done. It'll explore things with the school district, but we kind of have to be patient to do it and let it tell us what the community needs and wants and what's actually possible and what that might look like. And I hope that I'm not too bold in saying that, but then as we step through the phases of this work, we'll continually come back together and reevaluate what our next steps are. I do think for staff, the biggest anxiety point for us is this NPRSA levy. It's like sitting out there, like it sounds like to me that that's back on the table, that we may do something different with this 2025 levy. And that's fine, but I think this study is going to be a really valuable tool for us. Is that helpful? Any questions?
I would agree. I do have a follow-up to that though. I'll go back to my original point, which is in order to consider something different for the levy, we need to have data. This is a small piece of that data. So, but the timing is concurrent with when we would be asking for the rest of the data. So when are we going to ask the community whether there's a need for a pool? When are we going to ask the community what needs they have for broader recreational opportunities? This is not just about a youth center. If we're talking about broadening the aim of NPRSA. So I am concerned if we don't think about that issue now, because if we don't, we'll have a narrowly focused about a youth center. Okay, I mean, it's broader than the original kind of youth sports facility, fine, but it certainly isn't broad enough to say we're doing a community needs assessment of parks and recreational needs. So I guess that's what I'm talking about, is
I
how does
understand
this
that completely.
dovetail with that piece? And if the funding for this is targeted at youth, that's fine. Can we marry in some NPRSA funding so that we're doing these two assessments at the same time? So we're, again, not trying to confuse our audience.
That helps so much. So if the board would like for us to take on a more focused NPRSA needs assessment, I guess that's what we need clarity on too from the board as a whole, that we would also like for staff to study not just the potential of this youth community center, but also a future expansion of NPRSA work or a change in what the levy has traditionally been for the NPRSA. We are very happy to start talking about that. So we just need to know if that's what the board would like us to do. I do think strategically with the current study, we could learn a lot of that information, but I don't know yet how effective it would be to try to merge them both together, but we can actually think about that for sure.
Right, Councilmember Dembowski, and then Barbara.
And I'm sorry, Deborah, is it okay if we use first names? Do you mind?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I think that you have a lot of merit in kind of what you're suggesting there. But I think with respect to this kind of youth center, a la Boys and Girls Club kind of facility, the funding that I was able to secure at the county is really aimed at that. I agree with, like, we need to do a lot of talking to the community writ large about what we should fund through NPRSA on that cycle. Going and you mentioned the pool. I think we've just completed the pool studies, and I think we should maybe try and get a presentation on the results of that. They're back. I got a brief overview from Rob Carlindsey, the city manager at Kenmore, about a week ago when I met with him, but that could be helpful. And he expressed some interest. I think it's fair to share with this group that maybe NPRSA could be a vehicle for funding. And then what's been our core mission, the senior center, I think still should continue to be like that's got to be, I think, for me in this group, job one. With respect to how the levy came about, I'll tell you, I showed up at these board meetings for about 6 years when I came onto the council, and I hated coming because the needs were piling up. The senior center was beginning to fall apart, and we had no money. I mean, we had a levy that only paid the bonds that were issued to build it, and there was zero maintenance money. And the seniors were coming to us saying, "What are you guys going to do? What are you going to do? The windows are leaking, the roof isn't, the HVAC doesn't work, the carpet's worn out." And finally, at a meeting, I said, let's just run a levy. We got to go to the voters. It was kind of out of frustration and fear. And it was that simple. There wasn't, the conversation was our seniors who were closest to the problem saying, you guys have to act. You're our elected leaders. You're running this thing. You have to act. And we had no staff. I mean, it was an organization without any organization. The seniors really did pass the levy. I was like, let's do 3 or 4 cents, the bare minimum. Rob Carlinzi said, that's a mistake. You better go at least 5. Things are going to cost more. And we were worried, about going to the voters with a tax. And I can't remember, did it pass at 80%? Some number that you never see with taxes, right, Nathan? It was like off the charts because of the popularity of the senior center and how wonderful it is. I say all that by way of kind of background and maybe level setting. But also to say that I think we should think carefully. I really want to be true to our core mission, and think about if we're going out to broaden our mission, like, should there be a senior center levy for additional work that needs to be done? We got most of our work done, but should it be standalone, or do we do a broader single levy that brings in, this other facility if it comes back and it's recommended, or do we do 2 levies? I'm agnostic at this point on that. I think we should have a discussion about it. I think Chair Srebnick, Deborah, is saying let's be methodical and thoughtful and go to the community input. And I agree with that. But my sense is on the senior center work, like, let's figure. I would be frankly I wouldn't be opposed to a very simple approach, which is, how much more work do we have to do on it? What do we need to do to take care of our little Kenmore satellite to make it, usable in a real way for Kenmore seniors that are over there? What does that cost? And put that together. That's a base document to me. That's like foundational. There's kind of political concerns about, do you package something together if you were to be ready to do more of a youth community center, or do they stand alone? I don't know. That's what I want to talk to you all about in the coming months. And but I think we can go get a package done with this North Shore Youth Center, and see what that says. But anyway, there's some thoughts. I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
It
Rod.
was
Barbara?
really, the senior levy was real simple. It was like, we're desperate. We need money.
Right. Yeah. Barbara?
Councilmember Dombrowski said most of the things that I wanted to make sure that were brought to the board's attention. Insofar as there is still remaining work to be performed at the senior center, we are going to be able to get a lot of work done this construction season and in 2025. But there are always more things we could do, right? And I think it may make sense to sort of conceptualize this as Vice Chair Dombrowski was mentioning, potentially multiple levies. We have a levy that is the maintenance and operations at the senior center, as we currently have. We have then potentially an additional levy to repay bonds that we use to build a facility. This actually mirrors our levy structure for the first couple years that Bothell was administering for the NPRSA, where we had both the M&O levy going and we had a bond levy going for the very end of the bonds that we purchased in 2001 to build the Health and Wellness Center. That's not unusual. That's not unheard of. That's actually what we've done before. Something I want to make sure that we all know that Vice Chair Dombrowski did not mention is that we need to think about the amount of time that would be necessary to set up and sort of kick off this broader feasibility study. It's taken about 6 months to go from when we put out our request for qualifications and proposals to when we are now bringing before you the completed scope and mostly completed contract. We would expect probably a similar-ish timeframe for another study. So we would be looking at a very tight schedule to go to bid, get another study on board that could do the sort of really broad, what are all the community needs, and then get that information back to us in time for 2025 levy. Again, that sort of suggests that we might want to think about this as, do we have more than one levy going at once? Do we phase this as sort of levies that are on the 25 ballot, maybe another levy that's on the 26 ballot? This is the sort of thing that Christine and I would like to talk to you all about at the board member check-ins that I've reached out to you to schedule.
Yeah.
If you haven't gotten back to me, please let me know your availability in the first week of February. We would love to hear all of your thoughts on this.
And Barbara,
Thanks.
I haven't gotten one of those reach outs. Thank you. That's helpful perspective. And yes, you pointed out exactly my concern is that if we do these tag team, that we will run out of time. And so that's why I was suggesting to try to do them concurrently. I am fine with doing this needs assessment if it is broad enough. So it absolutely needs to ask about a pool. If we frame it as community center, I am a little concerned that people will fixate on the center idea as opposed to recreational needs more broadly. So those are my biggest concerns. So if there's a way to shoehorn in those concepts into this contract, I would be all for that. If there is not, that's why I was suggesting using some of our own funds to combine those efforts so that we don't lose the opportunity to actually ask the broader questions. So we are long on time. So I guess I'd be curious if there are any other remaining questions, and then I would like to hear from staff kind of what they heard from this discussion. Okay. No other questions. Does somebody want to speak for the staff perspective on this? What you've
I'm
heard
happy
from
to-
issues tonight? Yeah.
To speak to that, it's been very helpful, the feedback that you've given. What we understand, and Christine's having a few technical issues, but she can jump in at any time. What we understand is that we can proceed with this current King County grant funded feasibility and needs assessment. But as we work with the consultant to negotiate the community engagement effort, we should be a little bit more broad. We can work on strategic messaging so that when the community survey is unveiled, that it actually doesn't have to hone in right away on the youth community center, that we can be strategic about that messaging and learn a little bit more about key priorities that all of our communities may have, that may inform our next steps. It already, I think, addresses a pool as part of the original scope of work. So
Okay.
I see no issues in getting at that. Surveys can be tricky, but I do want to remind everyone the survey for the public is just one facet of the community engagement. There's a lot of insight and feedback from your cities, your city leadership, the James McNeils, the leaders out in the community that have to be considered as well. So it's a multi-pronged effort for the community engagement. We can make it a little bit broader. Is that, Chair, how you would like us to proceed with the needs assessment?
Yeah, do we need to have, I don't see on here, I'm a little unclear. Do we need to have a motion at this point? We are at that point. So other questions, Councilmember Perry.
I just want to note that, this district, so Councilmember Dembowski, Rod's district, as he wants to go first name here, it has the highest percentage of senior residents in all of King County. Yeah. And it has like the third lowest, maybe it's 13, 14, 15. So he's fourth in youth in all of King County. There is new census data out that I think would be really helpful to take a look at for the cities in the district to just make sure that it's clear what we're doing in terms of reaching to those particular cities for their particular needs. Woodinville is not in the same situation. And I don't know where Kenmore is, so like looking at the different spaces and figuring out what those needs are. I am not surprised it went to 80% because it is needed, right? People needed it and still need it. That's still going to happen. So I just would love to see data involved in this that tracks the census, that tracks who the population is for this particular, for District 1.
Thank you. Very helpful. I am all over the issue of data as well. So
Great.
All right. Any other questions before we go to the next step of, okay. Don't see any others. I will entertain a motion as shown on the screen. The chair will entertain a motion. Keep saying aye.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Okay, the
I'll-
motion before us. Oh,
Just real briefly, I know we have time. I really appreciate Deborah setting up the discussion. I hope it was helpful for staff, and sounds like we're going to proceed in the listening part of this, which is job one of electeds. is we're going to say, what do you need? And if it's outdoor recreation fields, I think you're definitely going to hear about that. I know Councilmember Shrevenick's city council has. If it's a pool, we'll hear about that. I'm really excited to have this feedback from the community and then be informed and see how we can take the next steps. So appreciate all the work that's gone into getting to this stage.
yeah, I definitely appreciate it as well. I just to put a pin on the pool issue, in case people haven't heard. So the district, North Shore School District does have a parcel that they are interested in being a site for a pool. And that the shorter answer on the previous siting study, was there's a site identified in Shoreline and a site identified in Kirkland, neither of which are in the NPRSA region. And at least for our city, we're much more interested in having something that serves our region, which is the NPRSA region. So I think that the thought was, potentially the district could participate by via that site. Donating that site, and then potentially the NPRSA might participate in terms of the capital build and potentially operations. But again, this would have to be a decision of this group. And presumably the school district would also be participating. So that was that. I appreciate that staff are hearing the issue of being broader and thinking about broader recreational needs that are not necessarily facility based. Okay, any other discussion? All right, so the motion is to authorize approval of professional services agreement A2401 with Architects. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All right, the ayes have it. Thank you. Good, robust discussion. Really appreciate it. So let's see, 2023 financial report.
Okay, I'll talk us through this real quick. Nothing surprising in this. I think we'll all be happy with the results. So 2023 revenues, this is a little bit deceiving. It shows our actual being slightly below our projected, but we do actually have that amount of money in the bank. It's just in different accounts. We ended up being unable to transfer the money from our bond fund into our general fund this year just because of delinquent tax revenues. But that money is there should we need it. So we are pretty much exactly on track in terms of what our revenue was supposed to be and what our ending balances were supposed to be. Moving on to expenditures, we're actually $100,000 under budget or so. Christine will tell you more about that in the capital repairs update whenever she tells you about the closeout on those projects. But that pretty much tracked exactly. And for our ending balances, we have 565,000 in our general fund, 181,000, actually 182 almost in our bond fund. Again, that is accessible to us if we need it. We have $350,000 allocated in its own separate grant fund. This is for the youth center study we've just been discussing. And we do still have a full $1 million capacity on an interfund loan with the county should we need it, but we don't anticipate needing to touch that at all. Any questions about those?
What a difference a levy makes.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for putting that together. All right. I think we're at reports.
Okay,
Senior
hopefully-
Center? Yeah, Nathan?
Great, thank you very much. I'll just kind of briefly, I don't want to take up too much time, but I wanted to share a few data points with you all just for last year. It was a pretty tough year still for the Senior Center, as both the organization and our community still recovering from the pandemic, and we still will be for a while. But I wanted just to share, we had a lot of bouncing back last year. And in spite of a tough year, we still had 79,800 visits or touch points at the Senior Center last year in 2023. So we saw that number like, oh yeah, that's why we're tired. Because that was really a robust year. And those touch points, they span a whole array of programs, from social services and food pantry visits to health and exercise to lifelong learning to social and recreational to meals. So we're pretty impressed. We're pretty happy with the breadth we were able to achieve last year. And one of the reasons we were able to do that on our shoestring budget and in a tough financial year is we had 480 active volunteers last year in 2023. And we're on track. I mean, we should even surpass that number in 2024 too. So those 480 volunteers were really impressive. They logged about almost 35,000 volunteer hours last year. If you start translating that into like full-time equivalents of employees and dollars, I mean, that is an incredible asset that we have. I want to call out one small subsection of those volunteers. One of our big goals in 2023 was to make sure we were rebuilding our board back to what it needs to be more reflective of the community. And I'm super happy that we've got our board now up to 14 members, so a full slate of board. And it really does reflect the community. A majority of our board now are people of color. They represent all different backgrounds and perspectives in the community. It's a really cool group, and I'm excited for what they're going to do in 2024. We have 2024 is going to be an ambitious goal, or a lot of ambitious goals. Our financial situation is still tough, and it is for nonprofits everywhere. We're still trying to fine tune what our financial model is and get to a more stable place. But, we've got the VSHSL Senior Levy Implementation Plan rolling out this year. We're excited to roll out our applications for that. We really want to expand our social services programs, our mental health offerings this year as well. We have a few great initiatives to engage underserved cultural communities, and we've been building on that in 2023, and we're excited to deliver on a little bit more of that in 2024. And then we've been making some progress in our staff compensation, making trying to dig back out of not investing in staff as we should have been for a long time. And so we're making a little progress there, but we have some ways to go. So with all of those projects going on, and then also overlaying that with some of the NPRSA initiatives next year with the envelope project and other big projects, it's going to be a big year. So we're excited. We're probably the right mix of excited and scared, but we're looking forward to a good year, and we're looking forward to our partnership in that.
Questions for Nathan? I have one. That is an impressive number of touch points, 79,000. I'm curious, how does that compare? Were you keeping track in that way pre-pandemic? I'm just curious how that compares.
We were not keeping track in the same way pre-pandemic. We have, during the pandemic, we rolled out a more sophisticated tracking platform that we're using now that better captures how many people we're serving and how we're serving them. But just to give you a perspective, we were probably half that many touch points, even with all of our online and delivery programs going on during the pandemic. We were well under half that many touch points during a year during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, is it your gut sense that you're kind of back to, pre-pandemic levels, or still kind of on the upward trajectory? I'm just curious.
I think it's interesting. I think we're back. I think we're just as busy as we were before. I think what we're doing is a little bit different because the community is different. And so there are some folks who feel like, well, when are you going to get back to doing X, Y, or Z? And we have to kind of point to, instead of doing X, Y, and Z anymore, we're doing A, B, and C, because that's how the community needs have shifted. So I'd say overall, the big picture, I'd say we're back.
Fantastic. Other questions for Nathan?
Good work.
Right. Yeah, fantastic. Christine.
Oh,
All right.
Sorry, Rod, did you have a?
Yeah, thank you. Not a question, but I just wanted to take an opportunity to just express my gratitude to Nathan. The leader of the senior center is just, I think, the key role in this whole operation. And Nathan, you have just been amazing. We are so fortunate, in my view, to have you leading this organization, which I understand is the second busiest senior center, maybe west of the Mississippi. Maybe with those numbers, it's the first. It's very popular, and I know that you have a lot of constituents that you're serving, and I just want you to know that you just instill a lot of confidence, and you've always been available when I call to check in, and I just want to thank you for your service to the North Shore community. We're very lucky to have you, and if there's something you need us to be doing, I hope you won't be shy about asking or telling.
That's very kind. I don't get accused of being shy very often.
Well,
and
I totally
struggling about who would run the senior center. This is a very unique arrangement. There was the Seattle organization, and they cut back budget, and there's been a lot of disruption and instability in kind of the management of this, if you will, and we tried this new route, and it's really been dependent upon strong leaders. You and your predecessor have been amazing, and I just want to acknowledge that and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I hope you didn't take anything that I or others said about broadening the scope to in any way jeopardize or diminish the senior center role. That is, we do not want to ever risk that. I mean, that is the priority.
Maybe behind kids, seniors might be the number one, or maybe number two, or maybe number one demand for pools. I mean, there's a big need there.
That's true.
Other questions, comments for Nathan? All right, Christine.
All right. Hopefully my internet stays connected. All right. So we'll just run through our our capital repairs update really fast. So last year ending, we closed out the senior center HVAC and roof replacement, as well as the health and wellness center HVAC and roof project. I just happy to report that we are actually $100,000. Would have been more if we didn't have the structural situation, but I'm glad that we were able to find that and repair it, and avoid any catastrophe. So that is great. We're moving forward in 2024 with the pedestrian bridge handrail replacement, as well as the health and wellness center envelope painting. We're moving through our job order contracting processes with that, and doing contractor walks actually on Friday. So excited to get those projects moving forward this year. Next slide, Barbara, please. So other things I want to talk about is one, if you haven't already, please fill out the authorized signature forms that Barbara sent out. As well as Barbara mentioned earlier, we are scheduling the board member check-ins. We want to talk with you all about general housekeeping, future maintenance decisions regarding the senior center levy, and then, of course, future levy planning as a whole. Another thing that we need to start thinking about is when we want to have our joint board meeting with the senior center board, how often would we like the boards to meet together? And then we just recommend, as we're thinking through the joint board meetings, that we only meet bi-monthly. So having a joint board meeting as our regular meeting last year kind of hit us pretty hard, hit staff hard on things that we needed to get processed and move forward from the board, our regular business. So we recommend that we have a meeting in addition to our regular bi-monthly meetings, just so that we can ensure that we can get our meetings, get you guys in and out of here, and we can get business done as approved by the board. So I think that is the end of my reports. So I think we can talk through, we can get all of you guys' input on the joint board meetings at our check-ins. So we don't really have to have, unless you guys want to discuss it now, we can definitely get your feedback on that and then schedule those with the senior center board at that time. So just some things to keep in mind as we go into our check-ins.
I had one
And say
more.
again, the structure for the check-ins is who?
It'll be me and Barbara meeting with each board member individually.
Okay.
And we
Okay.
Vice Chair Chair Shrubnik, if you haven't received that, we'll make sure that you get that that email.
Great, thanks. Councilmember Sarah.
I just wanted to note that I put something in chat. Some of you have seen it. That data is based on last year's census. It's information about our districts across the way, and you can see District 1 in there with seniors, youth, and so forth. Race and ethnicity, BIPOC, percent foreign born, so on. As of December 15th of each year, the census releases their new data. So this is for last year's data. So this data is for years 2017 through 2021. The new data, which is available on the census page, is for years 2018 through 2022. So there may be some changes to any of these different statistics, and we're going to be updating it for my group, so I'll make sure I get it to Rod as well, in the case that it's useful for you. One of the things that we're also looking at in my team, because we have towns that are very focused on this, is the crime data. And I just want to share that because I have 2 precincts in Bothell, there is property crime and violent crime, and we looked at it from 2018 to 2022. And Bothell did really, really well. It went down like 40% in violent crime and 10% in property crime. So it's really remarkable what's going on in Bothell in that regard, because I can assure you that is not not the case in many other areas. And that's something worth getting into as well, and really talking about in terms of the safety and what's needed and the robustness of the community to keep that going. Just throwing that in there.
Thank you. Other comments on the topic of next steps from staff, board member check-ins, and the joint meeting idea of not being taking the place of one of our meetings. I actually really appreciate that. That last point, again, maybe just getting anxious about the run up to the levy. I don't feel like we should sacrifice any of our meetings at this point. Yeah. Other comments? Thank you for all that preparation. Okay, so future meetings. And I think these are already on our calendars. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, okay, very good. All right. So, and as part of our, Becky, as part of, or I guess it'd be Christine and Barbara, as part of our check-ins, are we going over kind of the bigger timeline that we discussed, or is that okay? Or
Correct.
we'll bring it to future meetings as well. All right, very good. Any other things for the good of the order? All right. Well, beautiful. Thank you for that nice, gentle introduction to chairing. I appreciate it.
It's clear all of us, we got the right person, Deborah. Yes, you're this
Well,
wonderful.
if
Thanks
there's
for being able and willing to do it, and you're just
sure,
real
sure.
talent.
It's a good group and it's a great mission. So, so if there's no other topics to come before us, I move we adjourn the meeting.
I second that before she changes her mind about wanting to.
Don't have any gavel.
Everyone
Have a great
stay
night,
warm
everyone.
tonight.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.